for Global Business Update. Michael Wilson joins us now from Cape Town, South Africa. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. Asia markets fairly mixed this morning, looking at headwinds really for 2023. None of that's going to be resolved anytime soon. Hong Kong's up very, very slightly on the fact that, as I reported yesterday, China has scrapped its quarantine for incoming tourists. But the Shanghai Shanghai Composite dipped very, very slightly. The Nikkei down as well, about 0.5%. The Chinese electrical vehicle maker NIO has cut its delivery guidance for the quarter four. It said it was originally going to deliver about 48,000 cars. That's been brought down to 39,000, and the stock's down 8%. This is a direct problem as far as not so much supply chains, but more the COVID shutdown. As far as the United States is concerned, a relatively flat week in prospect, really. A slight rise in normal trade from the Dow, but generally speaking, futures relatively flat, and I think we're going to go out of 2022 with a bit of a whimper, quite honestly. However, Tesla is not. Tesla's shares down 11% yesterday. Since the beginning of the year, since the record high, down about 73%. And this is all to do with shutdowns in China, Musk and his rather messy acquisition of Twitter, perhaps spending too much time at Twitter, and it's struggling to find buyers in China and the United States as we speak. So there's a stock which was doing extremely well and now not so well. New sanctions are beginning to bite Russia. Now, this is according to the finance minister, Anton Siluanov, who spoke yesterday, saying that the budget deficit will be 2% higher than originally thought. This is because they're losing oil. Although they're raking in oil and gas dividends, they're not at revenue, not as high as they were. And adding to that from Russia, Putin now saying that he will punish those who go along with the European cap of $60 a barrel, and he will punish them, although he will give special permission to other countries to have access to oil and gas. And this plainly refers to India and China, which are buying it up, albeit at reduced prices, and thus not giving Russia the sort of revenue that it actually wants. Spain and the EU. Spain has joined in with the other EU countries, including Germany and France, to give direct state help for the cost of living crisis. It's giving €10 billion. And it also cuts to VAT and a one-off €200 payments to families earning less than €27,000 a year. Originally, help was given to families earning a lot less than that, but now that's been brought up very, very slightly. They have got inflation down in that country to 6.8%, which is the lowest in the EU. Germany, if you remember, has got a price break as far as gas and energy costs are concerned. France has decided on a €45 billion package, and of course there's the UK cap on energy bills, which brings the average to about £2,500 a year. As far as the United Kingdom is concerned, blue chips, those are the so-called blue chips, those are FTSE 100 big stocks. Actually, they've had a record 55 billion shares bought back. They've taken advantage of equity prices being historically low, and they have, it's mainly oil and gas companies actually who've done it. They returned of the 55 billion, 22.1 billion back to shareholders. It's a way of rewarding shareholders for staying in there. And finally, in the UK, bosses surveyed by Lloyds Bank, the majority are not joining in with the Bank of England's gloomy forecast for 2023. Yes, there will be a recession, but according to Lloyds Bank and according to the survey, the majority of those bosses actually surveyed in 1,200 companies were relatively optimistic about 2023. And even though the EU itself, which of course doesn't concern us directly anymore, even though it's a neighbour, doesn't concern the UK an enormous amount, is set to shrink quite fast, according to the Financial Times 30 economists surveyed by them. Britain's bosses are relatively optimistic about 2023. That's not a bad note to go out on from the global view.
All right, real quickly, I'd like to ask Michael, Why is it that the EU, the European Central Bank, is still tightening? Isn't this tightening going to have a knock-on effect as regards the economy? Because they said the outlook is still to tighten for the better part of next year.
Yeah, I think it will, and it certainly will have an effect. But like every other central bank, what it's saying is inflation down first, try not to crush the economy, try for a soft landing, and then encourage economies to work again. So yes, I mean, there is an immediate danger of possible recession and possible tightening too fast. But I don't think the European Central Bank could be accused of tightening too fast. If anything, people have been saying it's been tightening too slowly. So I feel as though even though the EU economy is set to shrink quite fast, according to the FT, I feel as though the central bank will be wanting to stamp down on inflation because it's now at least four times the average of what its target of 2% inflation is. So there's no question that's what they're going to do in the future. We will see how the various economies react to that.
All right, thanks, Michael. Talking about the UK bosses being optimistic about next year, despite the gloomy predictions, another area I'd like you to speak on is on tech. So according to reports, tech in the UK, particularly in London, did quite well in the last year despite the economic recession. And next year, they're supposed to even do better. So the valuation is around 1 trillion naira. There's some big backings this year, even though they didn't quite hit the target of over 41 billion as was projected. They still came to around 29.3 billion pounds in terms of investment or backings for these tech companies. I'd like you to speak to this, please, because we've been talking about the gloom, the businesses which haven't done quite well because of the recession, but tech in London has actually done reasonably well in the past year.
It has, and I think a lot of those companies are taking advantage of cheaper prices where they can actually find them. But I feel also as well that most people would say, and I think one of the reasons, again, I don't know the insides of the Lloyd survey, but the headline figure I think probably relates to the fact that most businesses actually regard a downturn as a place to start investing, not running scared away from it. And the most important thing about this is that this was not a survey necessarily of the largest companies. These are SMEs, these are small and medium-sized concerns. We're relatively optimistic about the way things are going at the moment. So with all the headwinds of a recession and so on, they feel as though, I'm guessing now, but I feel as though there is a big build-up in terms of consumption, which is actually not happening at the moment because people are worried, and when people are worried, they tend not to spend. But I suspect that will probably change next year. But who's to say? I mean, it's very difficult to make predictions as we are in the teeth of a recession right now.
Well, I mean, yes, it's good to hear the Russian finance minister saying that the price cap is likely to affect Russian deficit a bit further. But isn't it too early to connect that with growth within the Russian economy, considering the fact that the same Sulanov was saying that they will reduce output by 5% to 7% in 2023. Two, the shortfall will be funded through domestic bonds. And three, in any case, there is still great demand for Russian oil from India, from China, which has helped revenue in that country. Will it not be too early to say that, yes, Russia is beginning to really feel the pinch? Maybe this is temporary, and Sulanov just trying to be realistic. And then, of course, COVID. Japan has introduced new measures against travelers from China. Now they have to be subjected to tax. They have to show proof of negative tax. That's if you are coming from China. It doesn't apply to Hong Kong. It doesn't apply to travelers from Macau. India is considering the same measure. Malaysia has introduced the same measure. The US is also considering the same measure for travelers from China. Is this an indication that the COVID resurgence in China is really a matter of serious concern, considering the fact that China continues to, reopen?
I happen to think it is a matter of serious concern. I think 240 million cases of COVID, and again, it's all anecdotal, and I stress this all the time talking about China, but it looks anecdotal as well. It looks like hospitals are filling up, particularly with the old people, and there is a competition for Western-based vaccines rather than using either home-produced ones or Russian-produced ones. So I feel as though I think there is a danger of it. Depends what you think about COVID. I mean, it's entirely possible that we all have something like it, but our immune systems have actually continuing to beat it back in the same way that a cold or a flu rises as well. I'm not diminishing the aspects of COVID. I'm just saying that I think a zero COVID policy is a bit of a mistake. But again, I'm only going on what it's actually caused in China, which appears to be a lack of FDI, foreign direct investment, or a shortening of that. Certainly, people looking at that and wondering what the regulators are actually going to do in China. And so that doubt is not a good place to place investment. And I'm sure I don't need to say this to our viewers either. I mean, when you're looking at something like China, you consider you look at the possibilities of the market there, but at the same time, you look at the regulations and the kind of confines and the lockdowns which are being proposed, and you have to say to yourself, what's actually going on? And in that kind of uncertainty, very, very difficult indeed. As far as Russia's concerned, I was reading a very interesting piece about this. Now, as you quite rightly said, I'm in Cape Town at the moment, just temporarily, and in conditions of extreme secrecy, a Russian ship actually docked just across the bay from where I am at the moment in a place called Simonstown, which is a naval port. And it was there during the night. It unloaded and loaded during the night. Now, South Africa was one of those countries, like a lot of countries in Africa, which is not unfriendly towards Russia. So I think that whilst it may be that the European Union, the United States, and the UK and other countries are putting sanctions against Russia, they won't find the same in Africa. And quite rightly, Russia looks at Africa as being the developing continent over the next 20 years. So I think you're going to see much the way that the Chinese have. But what the difference between the Chinese approach and the Russian approach to Africa is saying, look, we understand that you have these backgrounds of colonialism, which you quite rightly hate. We're not wanting to colonize you. We are just saying that we want to regard you as allies, but you will develop in your own way. Now, if African countries actually buy that, there is a tremendous opportunity for Russia and its cheaper gas and oil revenues to actually take place. And there are 7, as I understand it, 7 tankers as we speak on the high seas with their identification systems actually switched off now. Which are waiting for China and India. Who's to say that they won't be loading into Africa as well? So, I mean, that's the kind of world that Russia is looking at right now. For better or worse, it does not necessarily regard the EU, the UK, and the US and other G7 nations as being primarily their export markets. There are plenty of other places in the world, and Africa is one of them.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Thank you very much indeed. Now, for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai.
Good morning, Rotus.
Just continuing the conversation from yesterday, you heard Michael Wilson talking about the welfare package that had been approved in Spain with regards to cost of living crisis. He mentioned Germany, he mentioned France, he mentioned the UK, he mentioned a number of countries that have taken action with respect to improving welfare. So we continue the conversation with the police. There is a poll on the This Day website, www.thisdaylive.com. And it continues the conversation. Your opinion matters. I encourage everybody watching to go on the website, scroll down on the This Day website, and you'll see this poll. There are calls for a creation of state police as a measure to tackle rising insecurity in Nigeria. Do you agree that state police will tackle Nigeria's security challenges? Yes, no, not sure. Go ahead and vote. But beyond state police, beyond insecurity, there's also the matter of the welfare of the police. Now, I heard, you three in the conversation yesterday, Rufai saying that American police are paid well, but even though they are paid well, they're still shooting black people. Not sure if that's an accurate comparison because there's a racial dynamic there where if a black person, you're more often than not at a greater chance.
That's an accurate comparison, but I'll tell you why.
Well, let's go through it.
I'll tell you why.
Let's start this off.
Yeah.
Let's look at some of the approvals that were put forward by the Federal Executive Council in December of 2021. 20% pay increase for the Nigerian police. 1 billion naira for uninsured personnel. 13.1 billion for outstanding death benefits of about 5,472 of them. 18.6 billion for tax waivers for junior officers so they can take home more pay. 61 billion for increase in rent subsidies. The subsidies are now anywhere from 15 to 20%. These have not yet been approved. Let's just go back to that before we get to salaries. These are yet to be approved. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, said that none of these, because this was supposed to take effect January of 2022, she said that it was not in the 2022 budget and that they had to be in the appropriation bill and that this had to be, a supplementary budget had to be sent. If you remember last week, we broke the news here on Arise News that the appropriation bill for 2023 had not been submitted, it had to be reapproved. I think it's today that they're going to be putting that forward. So this hasn't been approved. In March of this year, the House of Reps summoned the Minister of Finance, summoned Ben Akabweze of the Budget Office, summoned a number of representatives to ask them why none of this had gone through. This is yet to be approved. Also, there was now rumors later in March of a strike, that police personnel were going to go on strike because their pay had not been approved. The police force now put out a notice saying that this is a rumor being put forward by mischievous people. But they also threw this in. They said, well, a strike is mutinous. Essentially, I guess, suggesting that, sending a message that if there was indeed a strike, it is mutiny against the police force. But let's get to pay. Let's take a look at the constable pay. You've got the police recruits, right, who are the entry level that are in training. Then you become a constable, which is essentially entry level. I got this online. I've been trying to get verified for you guys. But this is roughly for grade 3, 43,293. Your 20% increase, if it is approved, takes him to 51,940. For grade 10, 51,113, his 20% increase or her 20% increase takes them to 61,000. Is this enough with where inflation is? Is this enough with where currency depreciation is? Is that enough at 20%? We continue. Let's take a look at, I think our next graph is the top 10 highest police killings across the world. The Philippines is number one. Mr. Duarte is 6,000 plus, the average between 2016 to 2021. Brazil is in second place, 5,000 as of 2019. Then you've got Venezuela, you've got India, you've got Syria, you've got El Salvador, you've got the United States, which is the only developed country in the top 10 for highest amount of killings, which tells you what you need to know about gun culture in America. Then you've got Nigeria, about 841 as of 2018, Afghanistan and Pakistan. I unfortunately didn't have enough time. What I intended to do was to compare the average pay of the top 10 nations with the highest killings to Nigeria, but I was only able to get like a couple of them. Venezuela, their currency is in the toilet, so I just left that one out. But Philippines average, according to Salary Explorer, is $540 monthly. Brazil, $438. Pakistan, $99. Nigeria, for the grade 3, at 43,000, using the official exchange rate, is $94 a month. At the parallel market rate is 56. I ask you.
Can I make one?
Hold on, let me wrap up before you make your point.
Yeah.
The Nigerian police force is at the entry level for a constable is one of the lowest in the world, if not the lowest, compared to other nations that have higher average killings on an annual basis compared to Nigeria. And there was a lot of bashing of the police that took place yesterday. And I really just want to state this, that on average, Nigerian police are good officers. I'm sure some of us know some of them personally. I know some of them personally. They are good. There are bad apples that are in the police force, but we cannot paint the entirety of the police force with a bad brush saying that they are bad. Now, that does not justify what happened with the lady that was killed, and the justice still needs to be served. And it is incredibly peak political season where you've got a statement from President Buhari, you've got a statement from Atiku Abubakar, you've got a statement from Peter Obi, you've got a statement from everybody who now all of a sudden really cares a lot about this. Reform has to happen, and just to emphasize, that 20% pay is not enough. You must increase the welfare of these police officers because they are putting their lives on the line on a daily basis to keep us safe. When something happens, they're the first people that we call. So that pay has to be improved, and until you improve that pay, I doubt, as far as morale is concerned, you're going to see much happening. So we cannot exclude, this is the point I want to make, you cannot exclude the low pay of police officers from what is going on in Nigeria.
Okay, so Rotus, you have a way of missing arguments.
Go ahead, okay.
What I said yesterday is this, and please listen properly. When you say police kill people, it is not because of money. It is because of an interpretation of bias that has not been checked over a period of time. The fact that there are no consequences for actions. And that's why you see in the case that an average police officer in America stops a black man, a killing will result in it. An average police officer stops a white man, a killing might not result from it. Oh, hi, officer. Sorry, I didn't see it that way, officer. Might probably end it. If you remember the case in America, the bias was so much that a police officer even harassed a Harvard professor. You remember that case that he could have even derailed America, and Obama settled it by calling the two men to drink. That's the same bias at which the police, I'm not exonerating the fact that the pay is not poor. The pay is poor. But when you have a society that the bias shows that there's no repercussion for action, people will constantly repeat those actions. In Nigeria, the bias is the fact that the police officer feels, because of the legal system, because of the fact that there's institutional ineffectiveness, he can kill people and go scot-free with it because investigations will not be holistic. And police officers have muted this for the opting time. And it is based on this they can do and undo. How you remember your own case that you stated in this same Ajiwe police station?
Same one.
You went to bail somebody. Is it non-payment of salary for no crime? Is it non-payment of salary that made the policeman carry gun? Is it non-payment of salary that make policeman carry gun in a party? And you say, Olokpa, take 1,000 for your bullet. He will shoot in the air. That is indiscipline. You saw a tweet that went viral that somebody pointed the police officer drinking on duty, and the police spokesperson that reacted said he's not supposed to drink on duty. And I was like, shame on the police spokesperson. Is that what you're supposed to say? What stopped you from instituting action immediately against him? You also make my point for me, Rotus. Look at Philippines, $540. But why the police can do and undo is because they have a state that backs them for this extrajudicial killing. Duterte said, go all out. Kill both the innocent and non-innocent because I want to have a clampdown on drugs. I'm not exonerating the fact that they're not paying well. In fact, I will go out there and canvass for the payments. But what we should also do, make consequences available for actions. Let us have a legal system where people can be investigated and justice meted. If the police understands that there are consequences for every action, and they see the actions being meted out on one or two of their erring officers, there's going to be a certain level of fear. The problem is the police don't respect the citizens. And this has also been aided and abated by the political class. That's my problem.
Okay.
How many police officers have you seen that has the audacity to kill a soldier in traffic? If that woman was wearing a soldier khaki that day, we just shoot her.
My view is as follows. I thought we had settled this discussion yesterday when we made it very clear that, look, it's not because of poor pay that policemen are trigger happy. But you had to bring up the argument today.
I disagree.
This is not an argument. This is not a debating.
This is not
a debating hall.
True.
Where anchors insist on winning an argument.
No,
it's just a conversation. It's just for us to put information out there.
Yep.
So let's, moderate the passion with which we want to win an argument.
Understood.
Okay. Now, the point is this: is it because of poor pay that policemen drink on duty?
God bless you, Dr.
Is it
Abati.
because of poor pay that policemen take cannabis while on duty? Because there was also a story like that. It's simply a question of discipline.
That's it.
Now, nobody argues with the fact that you should pay everybody well. I'm sure if you were to do the comparison of the pay of journalists in Nigeria and US and
my
UK,
God, yeah.
you will more or less come to the same conclusions. Okay? So people should not use poor pay as justification for lack of professionalism. And you see that the police hierarchy, they've been talking about violation of standard procedure, of rules of engagement. I think that that is where the issue is. And we should not use pay, to argue for criminality. However, you have a point that, okay, the pay can be increased. Nobody can argue with that. Everybody can do with more money. I'm sure if the 10 nurses, they will increase their money too, they will agree. After all, in the UK, all the workouts that you have is because of pay.
Okay.
It's because of cost of living. And Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are saying we cannot afford it because we will have to borrow more money. Now, you also pointed out that last year, the federal government agreed to increase money. That, promise, increased by 20%, was approved. And you are now saying that it's not in the budget. But I recall,
As in implemented. Yeah.
well, I recall that in September, the police affairs minister, Dagin Yadi, said that they had begun implementation.
In September of this year.
In September of this year, you can double check it. He said that they have begun implementation. But the policemen were complaining about their allowances, that there was a cut in their allowances. We can double check that to confirm it. Another issue that the police have raised this year has to do with pension. And only 6 days ago, the federal government approved billions for the 318,000 policemen and officers that we have. Group life assurance, they call it. And Leadway Assurance was selected as the lead underwriter. And the whole argument is to improve the welfare of policemen. But the point you can make is that they need to do more. Even if they started implementing, you cannot, when you look at the amount that they are being offered and you look at the inflation rate of 21.47%, then of course it's not enough. But the same argument can be made for every worker in Nigeria. So why are nurses not killing people? Why are doctors not killing people?
They don't have guns.
Because they have syringe. They have syringe. And then you come and argue that it's because nurses are not well paid. It's because doctors are not well paid.
All right, so let me
rest my
explain that.
case.
I was just going to mention that you talked about a 20% increase of their salary, but it's not consistent with the reality of inflation. Therefore, they're still being shortchanged, even if the new pay comes into play, into effect. 20% as opposed to the 21% inflation, which people have said, analysts have said is perhaps even underreported, is a shame. It's nothing to write home about. That's the truth. I'm glad you've analyzed this, and I'm glad that Dr. Rufai have also talking about the general welfare of Nigerian workers. Put that side by side by the take-home of our politicians, not just in their basic salary, because they can come out and say that I've only earned this amount, but in their allowances and packages. It's disproportionate, and that would definitely not all go well with the workers. We need to treat our workers better, particularly government workers in Nigeria. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lotus.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.